Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh. So on the show today, Leila Stuart. So Leila is extremely experienced in massage, but also yoga and yoga therapy. She's written various books. She is known for her work with embodied anatomy, experiential anatomy. So that's perhaps going to be one of the main subjects for today. Joining us from Canada, welcome.
Welcome to you too, to Canada.
So how did you get interested in the body? What was your journey into this world?
When I was very young, I became interested in the body. I grew up in a very physical family. We were always hiking and skiing and skating and all of that, all those good winter activities. And then when I was probably 11 or 12, I started cutting exercises out of my mother's women's magazines. And I realized now that that was the beginning of, that was sort of a manifestation of my extreme interest in the body. So I went to university, and as soon as I got to university, I started dance. I joined the Modern Dance Club because I always loved to dance, but my parents didn't have enough money to send me to classes. So I was, I would tape pennies on the bottom of my shoes and do tap dancing and stuff. And I just loved dance. And I was lucky enough back then, that was in the 70s, to be hooked up with only teachers who were into mind-body practices. Mm-hmm. So that was my intro. And there was no such word as embodiment or embodied practice back then. Back then, it was mind-body practices. So I studied dance and movement with people who were really into that. I got introduced to Feldenkrais, and so that was my journey. And then I got a law degree, and that kind of killed my body for a while.
You went from dance to law. I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah. And then that was a short-lived career. Just made enough money to travel. And then I became a massage therapist. And as I was in my last year we do a 2,000-hour training here in BC, I discovered experiential anatomy with someone who had studied with Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen. And I thought I'd died and gone to heaven, because there I was learning this very dry anatomy. I had my skeleton, and I could tell you where all the attachments were and what nerves innervated, but it was so boring to me.
Yeah.
And when I discovered experiential anatomy, then it became rich and juicy and full and functional.
Yeah.
So as a massage therapist, I would always teach people. I would be an educator, and it got very boring to me to just do things to someone.
Yeah.
And I became very strict about who I would take into my practice, because I would say I only work with people who want to do the work. If you want to do the work, if you want to take responsibility for your own healing, then I'm happy to have you in my practice. If not, then there's lots of other people around.
Great. I mean, in terms of anatomy versus embodied anatomy then, so I equally find anatomy studies a bit dull. Sometimes people think, because I've been in embodiment for a while, I should know all about anatomy. And, I've read a few books and studied a few courses, and this is the Talus Bone and all this. But I was always left with this question of sort of, so what? How does it help me if I know that there are whatever number of bones?
Yeah.
But that's not the only way to go, right? So maybe you could say a little bit about the difference between studying anatomy as would be done, say, at medical school, and experiential or embodied anatomy.
Yeah. So it's helpful to know what you look like inside and how things work. But that's sort of one-dimensional anatomy. If we take that information into the body and have a direct experience of it. So, for example, you mentioned the talus bone. Mm. So if we look at the talus bone, we look at the ankle joint, and we understand that the whole weight of the body transfers from into the ground through the talus bone, and that when you bend your knees, for example, the talus bone moves so that it really wedges in the in between the tib fib, and then the ankle joint becomes very stable. So when people have an experience of that stability, they can feel that in their body. And I always like to throw in a little a few stories. And so in Roman times, the talus bone was used as a reference. People would say, "Stand in your talus, man," you know, as a way of saying, like, stand up, stand in yourself. So when people start to get a sense of stability through their structure, for example, in the talus bone, then the nervous system feels safer, which is important now in this whole understanding we have of how important safety is to resilience, et cetera, et cetera. And what I find is that when people learn their structure and have a felt sense, then it becomes a doorway into other aspects of the self. So people start to become aware of their habits of, when I stand like this, I don't feel very stable.
Yeah.
When I stand, and then my whole upper body needs to compensate for that. So I need to hold myself up through my neck and shoulders.
Yeah.
And that makes me feel anxious.
Yeah. So the key thing here then is that embodied anatomy, is experiential. So it's, it's felt sense anatomy, exploring, playing with, rather than just knowing about something, which is kind of juicier just in the fact that it's known personally. The difference between reading about France and going there is quite huge. Reading some books on kissing and actually having kissed someone, these are different things, aren't they? So it's like there's an experiential knowing. But the second thing I'm hearing there is that knowing is not neutral. It actually changes one's embodiment. It changes one's being through, in this case, becoming, say, more grounded, we might say.
Yeah.
Or I remember, like, when, I don't know, one of my yoga teachers, Gary Carter, told me my legs actually go up far higher than I thought, and my arms go far lower than I thought. And I was like, whoa, I kind of have wings, and I have these tree roots that go right up into me. And it really changed the whole way I was standing and moving, just feeling that and realizing that immediately. It changed my being, and then we can get more choiceful about these things.
Yes, absolutely. So each part of the body, so the legs, the feet, the pelvis, the spine, the shoulder girdle, the neck and shoulders, and then we've got the whole inner body too. We've got the organs, we've got the nervous system, we've got all of the systems, which when we cultivate a felt sense of them, change us, transform us.
Yes.
And it becomes so the intellectual information, when it becomes felt and embodied, it becomes a non-intellectual experience, which can be very transformational, and it can really increase people's understanding of themselves and their self-compassion, and always this self-inquiry. So this is, I see, this is my habit, and when I practice this, or I have this in my mind, then my experience changes, my perception changes.
Yeah, and I actually just offer out to anyone listening to this, like, which system do you feel most in now? I tend to be in that muscular system of action, and then other people tend to be more in the sensual sort of skin, for example, or the solidity of the bones, or, as you said, a kind of organ system, that deep kind of visceral sense. And this is something we can ask ourselves at any point, is like, okay, which system am I most inhabiting? They're there physically, body-wise, but embodied, they're not all there all the time, right?
Yeah, and a lot of what I have discovered over all my years of practice and teaching is that many people muscle through life. They muscle through yoga poses. They muscle through life, and when they start to know what they look like inside and to respect the limitations of their structure and exploit its opportunities, then and they become aware of an inner support and Yeah, and they become aware of, gee, I could get support from my organs. Gee, I could get support from my fluids. Gee, I can really get support from my bones, so that my soft tissue doesn't have to work so hard. So I don't have to muscle through life.
Yeah, because it's an effort. I really notice my different yoga teachers, they all stress different things. Like Pete Blackaby's an osteopath, and he stresses bones a lot. And Gary's all about the fascia.
Yeah.
And John Sturk up the road's about the skin. And I noticed I felt radically different after each of their classes, because I'd been paying attention to a very different aspect of self. So not just an aspect of biology, but an aspect of self that I've been paying attention to. And I really feel that when I come out of their classes. I'm like, wow, this is, because actually in some ways their yoga, they do kind of, Pete and Gary both do sort of Scaravelli type yoga, but they're paying attention to a different thing. So I'm paying attention to a different thing. And I've even noticed this doing dissections that I sometimes kind of have, depending on what we're cutting up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the quote by Moshe Feldenkrais. He says, when we have one choice, we're stuck. When we have two choices, we're in a dilemma. If we have more than two choices, then we have choice. Then we have freedom. Then we have freedom. And so I like to teach people to be able to go back and forth between systems or parts of their body according to what is necessary in the moment. And then they become aware of, oh, I need this right now. Oh, I'm feeling really anxious. I'm going to go to my feet and feel my grounding or whatever. So it's, people build a toolbox so they can go back and forth.
Wonderful. I love you already. I had you recommended to me. I didn't even know much about you. So it was a good recommendation. Whoever made it, thank you.
So I'm a bit of a dilettante. I don't like to specialize in any one area. I think it's really important that people be like, wholeness to me is being able to move from fascia to organs to bones to muscles to whatever, to emotional self, to spiritual self, to have that freedom.
Yeah, people talk about behavioral flexibility, but we're essentially talking about ontological flexibility. It's like the flexibility to be different in different. Can you give some concrete examples of that? Like, for example, let's say, I don't know, I'm interviewing you, or someone out there has a conversation, they're listening, or maybe in another situation, I'm on a date with my wife, or another situation, I'm work and I'm trying to get the job done. Like, what kind of systems might one want to go to in some of these different, just general life situations?
Okay, so one of my favorite tools is something I call the heart hug breath.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do a cross section of the body at the level of the heart, then and you look at the relationship between the heart and the lungs, the heart is surrounded by the lungs, and the lungs actually form a heart shape around the heart.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever seen that cross section, but it's amazing. And so I get I have these heart balloons, and I fill them with water so that people can get a sense of the weight of the heart, and then we do a breath exploration. So most people think of breath as expanding outward, emanating from the body. So we do that a while and get sort of a sense of the surround breath, where the breath moves into the sides and the front and the back. And then to get a sense of when the lungs are expanding, they're also expanding inwardly.
Yeah, so they're caressing the heart.
Yeah, and actually that's very important for heart health, so that when we don't breathe fully, the heart is not getting its hug every heartbeat, and so it doesn't work so well. So the heart actually needs to be massaged by the lungs. And so then people get a sense of, okay, when I visualize the lungs expanding inwardly and hugging my heart, that's me hugging myself.
Yeah, I'm just doing it now as you're talking. It's a really beautiful experience. I just invite anyone listening to try this. As I breathe in, I kind of notice the kind of warm embrace of kind of two of my most essential systems, really hugging myself. And then when I breathe out, I notice this sense of like spaciousness, like my heart's got room.
Yeah. Okay. So then here's the next piece then to that. In Chinese medicine, when you go in, that's tonifying, and when you go out, that's dispersing. So you can as you breathe in, you can think of going into your heart, which is what you've been doing. You can also think which is tonifying. So when your mind goes in, when you inhale, that's tonifying. Sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need to pull yourself together to go deeper into yourself. But other times you may need to disperse energy. So this second piece is to, as you inhale, imagine the heart expanding outwardly against the embrace of the lungs. Mm-hmm. So that's a different experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're putting your attention on a different place.
Yeah. So if you're in a situation, say, having a difficult conversation with someone, and you really need to hold yourself with compassion, then you would do the inward one. If you're really angry and you're talking to someone, you're still getting the embrace, but you're dispersing. So that's a really practical example.
Yeah, wonderful. I love that. That's yeah. I was aware of that anatomy, but I'd never in years thought to use it that way. So thank you. That's two of my favorite places to play the heart. I was aware there was this structure. The lungs kind of have this neat heart-shaped box in the middle. But that's very cool.
Yeah, and then when you're moving, you can imagine moving from your heart. So the heart relates to the arms and the hands.
Yeah.
And energetically. And so as you reach for somebody's hand to shake it, where are you moving from?
Yeah.
Are you moving from your bones? Are you moving from your heart? Where are you moving from?
Yeah, I have people walk around the room from the belly, from the head, and from the heart. Or start a yoga pose by touching one of them and then going into the pose. And that seems to create, like doing a yoga pose from here versus from here, seems to create an entirely different feel for people by first touching the area and then moving from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of my favorites sayings in class is, where you put your mind matters.
Yeah.
And you've just given a really good example. And I spend a lot of time in my classes differentiating between the physical center and the pelvis and the legs, the emotional center and the heart and the lungs, and the intellectual center and the head.
It's a nice simple one. Is it even sort of simpler than 7 or 9 chakras? Like just using 3 is kind of a good place to start when I'm working with business people. That's kind of tangible. They can kind of get, okay, now I'm talking from here, and now I'm talking from here, and now I'm talking from here. Like they can get that quite quickly. It only takes a few minutes. They go, that does sound different and it feels different.
Yeah. And so, I just wrote a book on the psoas, and why I chose the psoas first is because it leads us to our midline, and it connects us. It connects us to the ground. It connects us to our organs. It connects us to our primal emotions. It connects us to our spine and our midline. And so when we're there, there's another example of if somebody really needs to feel their own inner support, their midline, you know what it's like when you're in midline, you're connected. And so that's another tool. The spine is a tool.
Can we talk about the psoas a little bit more, and we'll come back to the spine maybe, because yoga and trauma therapy is a little bit obsessed with the psoas of late.
Yes.
Soul and obviously it's this association with fight, flight, and psoas releasing, and different exercises like TRE and various other things. Like I notice people that are doing yoga poses which can engage the psoas have often these big emotional releases as well, so it can happen accidentally. Can you speak a little bit about the psoas and the importance of the psoas?
Yeah, well, it's not well enough recognized, I don't think, in the physical therapy community, because we've got from that community the visual of the cylinder of support, the core cylinder of support with all the core muscles. The psoas goes right through the middle of it. It's closest to the spine. It connects the diaphragm and the pelvic floor.
Yeah.
And it's intimately interdigitated with the diaphragm, so it's connected with the breath. All the organs sit on it. The psoas is like a shelf, so whatever tension is in the psoas is going to be transmitted to the organs. It's a great compensator. So because it's so big and it got so many attachments.
Yep.
All the way from T12 to the leg, and on each vertebra there's six attachments. It attaches to the transverse process to the body and to the disc of each vertebra. So it's got all these little slips, and whenever we have that in a muscle, it's like the multifidus in the back, it means that the muscle is actually designed by what my anatomy instructor called the Celestial Design Committee. It's actually designed to for each piece to move independently, to be able to have different functions. So it has an effect on our digestion. It has an effect on our structure. It has an effect on our sense of stability, because along with the other core muscles, but I think it's actually the main stabilizer and of the spine and the SI joint, and it's got a lot to do also with the hip joint. So it's a great stabilizer, but it also has a great ability to move. So all of these little attachment slips can move independently. In fact, the psoas is its own antagonist. So because it's so intimately tied to the sympathetic nervous system, it's the muscle that gets us in fight stance or fleeing or falling down and curling into that fetal protective ball. And it was designed a long time ago, historically, but we still have the same response now. So if you get cut off in traffic or someone speaks to you with harshness, then your psoas responds. And when that happens over time, so it can be contracted in a lot of different ways, but when you're in sympathetic arousal every day, several times a day, then it becomes very rigid in some parts. If you've experienced a trauma, then the psoas goes into huge contraction usually, or in the freeze response, it can become slack.
Yeah.
And so it seems to be, so my work with the psoas has all resulted, or what I say about the psoas has all resulted from the work that I've done with people over 20 years as a massage therapist and teaching this and just getting feedback and people saying, wow, when I do this happens, or so it seems to me that the psoas is like it's the primal response muscle. So our deepest primal emotions seem to be stored there, and it's like a Pandora's box. So if you open it too quickly or with too much violence, then you're just re-traumatizing. But if you approach it very gently and slowly and over time, then it becomes your inner resource. And so as the stuff comes up, you already have the inner resources to deal with that. You already feel, oh yes, I have a center. I can go to my center. I know how to activate my psoas and feel myself, feel my strength, feel myself standing in myself. And so the work with the psoas can really build that inner awareness and resilience and self-support, which is what is necessary in trauma. And just one last thing there, people who have experienced trauma, as you probably know, tend not to have a well-defined sense of center. And so when we work with the psoas, it's like, there I am, I have a center.
Right, because it's right in the middle of all those core systems and core responses. So if someone listens to that and go, okay, great, cool, interesting, I get it. What's the kind of action thing here? What's the so what? What does someone do if they're kind of interested in exploring this psoas?
Well, buy my book. I guess. No, what I have found is that what's necessary to start with is basically to befriend the psoas, to create a relationship with it. So that means putting your hand, like knowing where it is, putting your hands on it, breathing into it, stroking it, talking to it, and then being able to feel it. So I teach people how to palpate it, how to feel it.
Because it's a bit of a mystery muscle, isn't it? It's kind of like, it's not like the biceps you can just grab it. So it's kind of quite deep in you, and then it's
deep. Yeah, it's deep, but because it's connected. Okay, you want to try another thing?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so the psoas and the diaphragm co-contract.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever you take a rib breath, so breathing into your ribs, the psoas pops up. So I'll tell you where to put your hands. So if you find your the V at the front of your ribs, and then go down about an inch, and then out on either side about an inch, so that you're just at the bottom of your ribs, about 1.5 inches from your midline. And then if you consciously send your breath sideways into your ribs, you might feel something pop up from underneath. Do it a few times, move your hands around. It might be a little closer to the midline, a little bit farther out. And if you want to test it, so if you want to make sure that you're on it, then you take one hand and put it on the knee and try and lift your knee up, and that will make the psoas pop up even more.
Oh, that. Okay.
Yeah. And you see, you can follow that all the way down to the pubic bone. And then I teach people to activate it without movement.
Yeah.
So just like you can train people to activate transversus, you can train people to activate psoas. And when you activate it before you do a movement, or when you're doing a forward bend that the psoas falls back to support the spine, then like hands holding the front of your spine when you're going into a forward bend, then that's a really practical way of using the support of the psoas.
What are some of the other kind of bigger shifts you see when, like when I realized how long my arms went into me, or when I realized how thick the spine was at the base?
Yeah. And that it's in the middle of your body.
Yeah, right. I was like, whoa, I thought there was a little bumpy bit at the back, and that's just a little bit sticking out of the spine. That's not the spine. Yeah. So, what are some of the ones that you see the sort of most like wow from people, and they go, wow, that's really shifted how I move or think about myself or am?
Okay. So there's, whether we're working with the spine or the psoas or whatever, there's 3 sort of basic areas that I have found over the years that people experience change in. One of them is that they become in touch with them. They become, I call it in touch, in tune, and in time.
Mm-hmm.
So in touch, people become aware of themselves as grounded, in touch with the ground, so that they can stand up for themselves, stand on their own 2 feet, and also in touch with their deeper self. So they become more seated in themselves. And when they're there, then they tend to be able to live more from their whole self, from their wholeness, rather than from their conditioned self. And secondly, in tune, because all of this work really builds in kinesthetic awareness and anatomical intelligence, that people become much more in touch with their inner sensations, with their feelings, being able to differentiate a thought that is not a useful thought from a thought that may be useful. They tend to be more in tune with other people and also in touch with something that's greater than themselves. There's sort of that viveka, that discern.
It's self, including values, emotions, what I care about, as well as the thoughts. And then there's relationships, and I'm curious about how that link does or doesn't develop, because I've met plenty of yoga people or other embodiment art people who are kind of in touch with themselves, but it somehow hasn't made the leap. I think it's more to say that it just naturally goes to relationship, because it doesn't always, in my experience.
Yeah, well, and you see, I've had the experience over the years of teaching people that naturally happens, that awareness is awareness is awareness, that when you become aware of your physical self and aware of the other aspects of yourself, then that just seems to naturally spill over into awareness of, well, if I'm having these feelings, maybe that person is having those feelings as well. Can I challenge you
a little bit here? Because surely you've met people in the yoga world who are actually all their attention's in themselves, and it can be weird. Like we're having a conversation, right? Like a good amount of my attention's on you and your smiles and your breathing and reaction, and like if I'm just like all in myself, and I'm having a conversation with you while just being totally present to my own internal process, it's really disconnecting, no?
Yeah. Well, I taught a yoga therapy training for 15 years, and one of the things I constantly said to my students is one eye in, one eye out.
Yeah.
When you're teaching, one eye in, one eye out. I mean, really, when you're doing anything, one eye in, one eye out. And
that's why I'm saying it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the work helps people to be present with what is. So and that means being aware of other people, of the world around you, and that you then respond to the actual needs of the moment from a more authentic place, and not from your old crappy conditioned self.
Great. Now I'm with you on this. 100%. Yeah. I just want to kick back a little bit against the kind of embodied awareness always leads to relational awareness, because I've just seen so many instances of meditators and yogis and other groups where that just hasn't happened. So I'm really curious, like how that happens, and sometimes really well and other times not so much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's how it is. We have a self, we're part of a bigger self, we're part of the world, we're part of our community, and when we ignore any one of those, then we're not living a complete life.
Yeah.
And I mean, then we make choices. How much energy do I want to put out there in the world, changing things? How much energy do I want to put into my own self-inquiry and my own self-transformation? Like what is that balance?
So these are the big shifts that you see then. So people getting more in touch with themselves, more grounded, more connected. Yeah. Are there any other pieces that you think you've mentioned? The psoas. Are there any other? I know it's all important, right? But are there any other particular bits that you see? Wow, that really changes people when they do that.
Organs.
Say more about that, because I feel like in some way that's the sort of, how can I put this? It's not the most obvious system, like people that lift weights get aware of their muscles, and have a lover get aware of their skin, but organs is a bit more deep and
Well, if you think of a gym bag and stuff it with gym stuff, clothing, then it's still kind of soft and pliable, but it has a rigidity, not a rigidity, it has a tone to it, right? And that's how we are with our organs. They're stuffed inside. Each organ has its own movement, both on, we call it motility and mobility. So the organs are supposed to slide against each other. They also have their own intrinsic movement in 3 planes, and an unhealthy organ will lose one of those. So we want to move the organs from the outside to affect them, but we can also get a sense of the expansiveness and the volume and the weight of the organs as an inner source of support. So for example, people who tend to be in their heads, or very vata people, very airy people, to find the organs, to find the organ body brings them down into the ground, because organs are ground, organs are feeling, organs are support. And so so again, I fill organ-shaped balloons with water, put them in a bowl, and people feel how heavy the bowl is. And that's inside of you.
Wow.
And the organs are full of fluid. So then if we then play with moving from the organ, so take the heart again. If you get a sense of the weight and volume of the heart, and then you sort of pour that forward, that takes you into the beginning of a forward bend, or you pour it backward, it takes you into a back bend or a side bend or a twist. And then you connect the arms to the heart, so that you're always staying connected to the center when you're moving out and interacting in the world.
Yeah, and I just want to point listeners to a few more resources here. So Beverly Nolan, we had on the show, is also trained by Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen in that body-mind centering kind of tradition. She was on the show talking about this in a therapy context. And I know there's a few teachers working in the UK this way. Aki Okamura, sorry, I forget her name, is in Tri-Yoga in London. Aki, just look up Aki, A-K-I, in Tri-Yoga. She's doing this. And Amy Matthews, I was in a workshop with, which is very good, coming again from this kind of organ system and different systems kind of approach.
Yeah, and I haven't done the whole BMC training, but I've been lucky enough to work with people who have. I've only studied with Bonnie once, which was amazing, but I tend to be an autodidact. I learn a lot just by learning, by reading books and using myself as my own laboratory. And that's what I encourage people to do self-inquiry, to use yourself as your own laboratory. Yeah,
good stuff. Okay, and tell us a bit more about yoga therapy. So that's something I don't know that much about. We had one person on the show from the Netherlands who was in that world, but it's pretty new to me.
Okay, what would you like to know?
What is it? And let's start there. What is it to you?
Okay. So yoga, all yoga is therapy, but not all teachers are trained in a therapeutic way. So yoga therapy differs in a number of ways. You've probably heard of the koshas model, which is just looking at a person as a multidimensional person with a physical body and an energy body, an emotional body, an intellectual body, a spiritual body. And so it's about looking at someone and what's going on in them, we may not look at a specific condition. So if somebody has diabetes, for example, we don't just say, okay, well, for diabetes, you do this, this, and this.
Yeah.
We look at the person in front of us and we do an assessment from all of those different aspects. And we see, where's this person out of balance? What can they do? What do they need to support themselves to greater ability, functionality? If it's a person who's dying, what kind of resources would be good for this person in order to die at peace? So it's looking at the person, not the condition, and coming up with practices that are very specific to that person, and modifying the practices according to the abilities and the conditions and what you want, what together with that person you've decided are the goals of the therapy. So someone with diabetes, with diabetic neuropathy may have as their goal, I want to go for a walk around the block.
Yeah.
So then we look at, okay, well, what is that going to take? What systems, what koshas need to be involved? We try things, we see if they work, we modify them. And you can only do that if you have very specific training. And so there's yoga therapists who have secondary certification, like me as a massage therapist or a physician or a kinesiologist or a physiotherapist. And that can be very helpful, but not necessary, because also a big part of yoga therapy is applying the teachings of yoga, the philosophical teachings of yoga. So maybe one of the most important things for this person would be ahimsa, or self-compassion, building self-compassion. So we look at all levels of the person and kind of build them up so that they have more of themselves.
Yeah, so it's not just like, okay, this person's got asthma, so they have to do downwards dog. It's, okay, how they relate to themselves, how's their ethics, how's their diet, how's their spiritual life, how is their relationship. So looking really holistically at it is the kind of sense I'm getting.
Exactly. So I'll give you an example. I had a student some years ago with fibromyalgia. So she was in severe pain a lot of the time. And she said once, the class that helped me the most with my pain was a class that we did on forgiveness.
Wow. Yeah. I'm always in this exploration when I'm, I go to get a massage once a week, and a pretty open-minded massage therapist I'm with. Whenever she finds a bump, or a kind of knot, she's like, okay, did you just fall over? And then sometimes it's like, no. And then I'm investigating and I'm exploring and I'm like, hey, what is that? Maybe that's to do with, my wrist I've hurt my right wrist, and I'm a right-handed person. I'm a big doer. And I start investigating, maybe I'm doing too much again. And that's, I've hurt myself that way. Or I've got this pain here. Oh, it's right behind my heart. That's really interesting. And sometimes just I fell off my bike, right? So, sometimes it just feels like, it's not, I don't want to get too kind of woo-woo about it, but there's a way in which I think that's a worthwhile investigation, shall we say.
Absolutely. I mean, we embody metaphors in our body, and it can be important to realize, oh gee, I've been victim my whole life, or I give up my power whenever I'm in this situation, or whatever it is, because we know that people have that the physical is not just physical. We know, I just did an amazing 8 hours with Dr. Lorimer Mosley, who's the pain neuroscientist who's changed the face of pain in the last several years. And it really is all in the nervous system and the brain.
It has to be in the nervous system and brain, because otherwise phantom limb syndrome wouldn't exist.
Yeah. And he's done lots of research with phantom limb pain, and one of my most life-altering takeaways that I from that time with him was that pain is an output of the brain that depends on the inputs.
Yeah.
And if there's more inputs that signify safety than signify danger, then pain will be radically altered. The pain experience radically altered.
Some great experiments like that. People can push a pressure point like by the ear on this part of the hand, between the kind of index finger and the thumb, and then just think about someone you hate while you're doing that. And it just gets way worse. It's like, suddenly like the pain increased, because there's another stimulus coming in that's kind of framing it.
Yeah. So I see also yoga therapy as an educational process. So for people so that diabetic person to understand the effect of stress on the endocrine system, to understand the effect, how the whole sugar uptake and uptake system works, and how do I where are the areas in my life where I experience stress? What can I do about it? What are my inner resources that I can then I can call forth when I'm dealing with it. And oh gee, after 2 months of practicing this, my my insulin levels have gone down.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, the importance of holism in health is undeniable, I think, even to kind of very Western doctors these days. What's your personal practice edge? So what's, your yoga therapy, as it were? You might be going to someone else with your experience. I imagine you're just working with yourself. But what's your practice edge? I mean, how many years have you been involved with embodied arts? A while, right?
Well, I started doing yoga when I was 19 because I wrecked my back in a landscaping job, and somebody said, well, there's this thing called yoga that's supposed to be good for your back. So I just bought a book and started working with it, and I felt I felt great. I was able to take the pain away.
And there's empowerment in that, isn't it? I just want to underline that story, because it's like, hey, I had this problem, whether it's physical or emotional, and I did something about it through my own action. I didn't go to a doctor and get some pills. Yeah. Like, I did it. I did the work, and something changed. So that's what, like 10, 15 years ago. So I'm sorry, I can't resist a little charm here. The listeners can't see your beautiful silver hair.
Yes.
So I'm guessing it was
ice blonde. Ice blonde,
that's the new silver.
Blonde. Yeah. So I guess that really started me and empowered me. And I still had that back issue for probably 20 years before I really got serious about training as a yoga teacher. And then it became something that I could very easily manage. And now I don't really experience it. And so it seems like I'm one of those people that has to learn from my own experience. Yeah. So I've had the back thing, and then I got really, really sick for over 15 years with chronic fatigue, and then a systemic inflammatory arthritis. So I was in extreme pain, excruciating pain. I couldn't walk. I couldn't do anything. I was sleeping 16 hours a day. It was really awful. And I just kept my practice. So so my knees were swollen like grapefruits at one point, but I could hobble downstairs to my studio. I have a home studio. I could do half an hour of yoga therapy, and I use a lot of other things besides yoga poses. Soft balls and lots of things, micro movements, and I could decrease the swelling in my knees, and so that I would be able to walk up and down the stairs without hanging onto the banister and going one step at a time. So I knew that I could do this stuff, and now as I'm at the tail end of that healing, I have energy, and so now my practice is balance poses, because I'm aware that I need to get stronger. So I'm having so much fun doing balance poses and standing on my head.
Right, and I often hear these stories of sort of healing through kind of yoga or martial arts. We do need to learn the hard way, and sometimes it does seem.
Yeah.
So that's your practice right now. That's your kind of edge, is the balances. That's your main.
Yeah. Thing, and I have a very dedicated meditation practice as well. And that was when I was really sick. That was all I could do.
Right. And what I love about meditation is it's very hard to take that away. I can get injured and not go to Aikido. I can have something you can't get to yoga, but I can sit in a plane and meditate. I did the other day. I can lie down on my bed sick. Even if I'm nauseous, there's still some sense of being present I can play with. Yeah. It's just, sometimes it's kind of all we're left with. I in many ways, I feel like meditation is the most fundamental practice, because everything else is built on that foundation of awareness.
Yeah. And it brings you, it connects you to yourself in a very deep way, so that you can then be available. And it connects you to, well, depending on what meditation you do, of course, it connects you to the greater than you.
Nice. There's three connects, healing the three disconnects, right? There's kind of self, relationships, planet. I'd probably add in there maybe as well, but something greater. Well, listen, we're coming to time now, which I'm sad about because this has been delightful. Really, and you've obviously got a huge amount of knowledge to give, and I'll be looking up your courses online. Where can people find more about you?
They can go to my website, leilastuart.com, LeilaStuart.com. And I'm just starting to do some online stuff. I've done some stuff with Yoga U Online, and I'm going to be doing more stuff myself. So on my website, there's a few videos, and people can sign up and get 2 chapters of the book that I wrote with Donna Fari.
I found, yes, that connection with Donna Fari. Most people know her name, so that's worth mentioning. But I found not that much about you on YouTube, considering sort of how experienced you are and how well respected you are. So I hope that.
No, I'm just starting that. I just got a video camera.
But if you want any tips, let me know. I've got 1,000 videos up, and I'm not half as experienced as you. So if you want any tips on any of that, I'd be very happy to help.
Oh, sure.
It's important in the 21st century, I think. Okay, so aptly named The Play of Life. Stuart, any final message about the body before we sign off?
Go in.
I think you're the only person that's nailed that in 2 words. Plus guests. So well done. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay, thanks for having me, Mark.
Enjoyed this episode, subscribe to get more. And you can also leave us a review on iTunes, which helps with our rankings. So really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support the podcast even more, then fund us. Go to Patreon, give us $1 per episode. Those who don't know, Patreon's a really good way of supporting things you want to see more of in the world. I know so much is available for free now, and what I'd say is a lot of energy and effort goes into this podcast. I put it out there for free so everyone can get it. Maud and I work on this. Everyone that wants it can have it for free. And if you want to support us, it is really appreciated. So it's patreon.com/Mark Walsh. And of course, if you want any in-person training, you can visit embodiedfacilitator.com. There's loads more resources there too.
Till next time, welcome home to the body.